Hello, this is Thomas Schultra for Moreland University, and this is Module 39. And today we're going to be looking at Standard 10. And so if we look here at the clinical rubric, this is going to be encompassing school improvement. And so we're going to be looking at continuous improvement. We're going to be looking at data-driven instruction, building relationships and connections with other school leaders, and then also the school improvement plan implementation and presentation. And so top here, standard 9. So we look on the portfolio and we go over all of the artifacts that I have here. And so let's go back, let's look at continuous improvement. How does an effective leader use methods of continuous improvement to achieve the vision, fulfill the mission, and promote the core values of the school? So I think overall, I mean, again, I'm just going to leave this on the proficient side, not the outstanding side, because I feel like there's a lot more that goes into the outstanding. But if we look at some of the artifacts here, um, the one thing that I would like to focus on first is looking at teacher observations and evaluations. So these are things that I do as my responsibility as a chair. So already in a sort of middle management leadership position. So not only focusing on the observations that I have as a teacher, but also the coaching conversations, and then also the discussions that I have with my head of division, Mr. Cumberworth, and also head of school. But that goes into the other thing that I wanted to focus on here, which is that my evaluation. And so these are discussions where I have face to face, also in our chair meetings, but face to face conversations with the school leadership that goes into this right here. And so talking about the mission and the vision of the school is that, you know, literally part of my job title as chair of social studies is to make sure that the teachers within the social studies department are fulfilling that part of what basis is and what we want our classrooms to look like, what we want for our student outcomes and learning. Then the next thing that I would like to showcase is also the training that kind of goes into that follow-up. So again, these are things like the Summer Institute where we go every year. So it's new teachers, senior leadership, all the chairs, all of our CADs, which are the curriculums, people that develop the curriculum for every subject level, except for APs. But we all get together every summer before our on-site training for schools, and a lot of professional development goes on. And so again, this is driving home the school mission and the vision that we have at Basis, and then also the development of the chairs. So every year we meet again at another location at a Basis school, and then kind of go over some extra professional developments and how we can, you know, just be better chairs for our colleagues within our departments. Sorry about that. I will show that in a second. Again, data-driven instruction. How does an effective leader develop technically appropriate systems of data collection, management, analysis, and use, connecting as needed to the district office and external partners for support in planning, implementation, monitoring, feedback, and evaluation. So the one artifact that I have here, but I'll go into a bit more of a discussion, is using, again, the diagnostic review that we use on GradeCam, but to a larger extent, using this data, again, not just to collect numbers, but one of the things we want to make sure is that when we're taking the data, we want to be able to, you know, use it in the classroom for review. So this is what we use for a comprehensive examination review. to take the data from all of our mock comps or diagnostics and to be able to differentiate and individualize students who are in need, because obviously some students excel in certain areas of concepts than others. Some struggle with writing if we're talking about history, and the free response questions, whether it's a DBQ, LEQ, or the SAQ. And some do very well with multiple choice, and then on the opposite, some excel in writing, some struggle with the source analysis for multiple choice. So using GradeCam is one of the areas in which we have emphasized this, not necessarily as a school, but that's something that I think in our chair meetings we've sort of reflected on that being something that's going to happen more next year. But in my department, I asked my fellow colleagues in the social studies department to use GradeCam a lot, so that way we can take the data and again, not just collect numbers on how students are doing, but use it to differentiate in our instructional practices. And so here, I'm going to put myself at a outstanding. Again, we don't have a school district. We are in international and bilingual set of schools of a network. But one of the things that we do use is we use GradeCam a lot to look at how tests are being made, how test questions are being created that are fair, and also using the collection of the data from the results that we get. And one of my history teachers, she did a really great job this year with continuously improving in her instructional practices based on how the students were doing. And each quarter, her students had gotten better. So, I don't necessarily think alone that data-driven data collection was the cause of it, but I think it was the implementation of what she was seeing from her students, and how she could use that data to drive her practices. So again, I got to put this more on the outstanding side. Building relationships and connection with other school leaders. So again, the one area here would be the training. Okay. So I showed you the on-site training, the summer institute, and then also the IMAT training for chairs. So this is a great networking process that we have where we can meet teachers, CADs, chairs, and senior chairs from all of the other network schools at Basis. This picture, so this is a message I actually got yesterday, and this is on LinkedIn from another teacher here in Wuhan who is getting ready to, or trying to see if they could host a History Bee event in Wuhan. There's other locations in China, but they want to host one in Wuhan, and whether or not we think Basis. So again, so this is just kind of a strange but nice coincidence of being able to communicate and network with other teachers outside of Basis. And so just meeting this person for the first time, but one of the things that I did do in a previous module was be able to create some sort of networking event for leaders within social studies. And so again, being able to, this goes back to module 8 where I feel like I'm developing, but being able to host or create some different initiatives for our school to showcase what our social studies students in our department is doing would be a great way to kind of shift from that developing to the proficient and outstanding. And I think on top of that would also be hosting an event like this somewhere, maybe not at Wuhan, but somewhere where we can all get together that's sort of outside the normal training parameters of what our school already does, and get together and kind of promote social studies. Again, not just for basis, but also in Wuhan. Um, so yeah, so here I would give myself a proficient because I we already do these sorts of things at basis where there is a lot of networking collaboration with other school leaders. But one of the things that I can do is make sure that there's more of an emphasis on networking and collaboration with other people, whether they're social studies teachers, humanities teachers, but also school leaders within Wuhan to make sure that we can build a good networking and relationship structure. And then the last part, the school improvement plan implementation. So how did the leader implement the priorities of the school improvement plan, and how was this implementation presented to key stakeholders within and outside the school to communicate changes and gather feedback? So one of those things is the networking or the 360 questionnaire that I sent out to students, parents, teachers, and senior leadership to kind of gather how it is that I'm doing as a budding school leader in basis and how well I connected with students, and then also that parent engagement. So for priority 4, if we go here to the school improvement plan, and so if you look at the 4 areas that I'm looking at, teacher observations and mentorships. So again, so we already created a lot of these. So the observations and mentors, observation checklist. So again, we're looking at the TL strands. And one of the feedbacks I got from Mr. Cumberworth when we are talking about this is not using 5 and 6 when we do the classroom uh, portion of it, but using this sort of checklist as something that when teachers walk in, they can go in and already have a form and an idea of what it is that they're going to be looking for that day. Maybe they're only going to be isolating one of the TL strands that they're looking for, but they might also use the all 4 of them when they're going into the classroom. So we already have that. And then we have the coaching and reflection template. So again, this is something that teachers and chairs, senior leadership team can go in with a conversation with a teacher and kind of guide them and mentor them into that sort of reflection process. And so I think, so as far as this part, um, I did gather information from the 360 survey. I'm still waiting to be able to, get a statistically significant amount of respondents, just so that way I can have more information on some of the feedback on how well I'm doing as a teacher with all of my colleagues at the school, but also as a leader, as a chair, and then also how parents and students are feeling about my leadership. Another thing to go back to the standard 10 was looking at the allocating of resources. So again, this is something that I'll talk about more with my head of division, Mr. Cumberworth, but making sure that we can procure the type of funding that we need for these priorities. Now, again, some of the problem with this, and we've talked about these in our virtual classes, and we've talked about this with Mr. Cumberworth in our mentor meetings, is just the fact that at basis, there's a lot of things that are already implemented and strategized from the head office of our network of schools, and so therefore, there are certain things that are within the priorities that I have as a school implementation that I cannot do specifically for because of the fact that basis already has its own structure, right? So for things like Power School, Grade Cam, using Teams, those programs and those software are already things that the head office purchases. So any other things that we use outside of this, the network um, sort of software packages are going to be very small in comparison as far as what we do to either grade students. We also have our BG Cloud and where we do our observations and our coaching. And so one of the things we talked about as far as with Mr. Cumberworth is, making sure that we can uniquely set up our team's pages that are beneficial to students and also parents and colleagues. So there's little things that we can do, but for the most part, there's a lot of things, protection, particularly when it comes to the budget, that are already sort of taken out of our hands. And so even going all the way to the head of school and the general manager, a lot of those things are sort of out of our reach, and it's what we can do with the resources that we do have. So another thing would be like if we look at the reduced budget that I created in module 35, and we look here is the cutting of a 5% reduction in the types of resources that we're using. I think generally kind of overusing in ways that we can sort of cut that budget. So again, like if you look at like food service costs, like I'm not talking about reducing the quality of the food, but it's more about the waste. And one of my duties is canteen duty in the morning, and you see a lot of students and a lot of staff members, excuse me, generally throwing away a lot of food. And so one area of that reduction is reducing the amount of food that we waste. So that way we're purchasing less food and we're using it, or we can, you know, give food away. I don't know. So certain areas where it's not. I know that like when you see the red and you see reducing the amount of money, a lot of it is not necessarily meant to reduce it so that way the quality goes down, but using it more in an efficient manner so that way we're not spending as much money in the first place. And then we can kind of go back and we can allocate those resources in a way that can help the school with those four priorities. Again, a lot of this is taken out of our hands, and so therefore, these are sort of ideas in which I think we could have more efficiency in our purchases. But again, that would be sort of on the peripheral of what we can do as a campus, and not necessarily what we do as a net. The other thing is that so again, we don't have a school board, we don't have a district. But the other thing is sort of that communication with parents. So here you go. We look at the parent meeting for social studies, and engaging with parents and stakeholders. So again, this was more about how can we use social studies department to showcase what students are doing, outside of other departments and outside of other areas. To kind of highlight what social studies is doing and how their children are making a big impact and giving them the sort of recognition that they deserve. The other is the engagement with parents. Again, so we don't really have a PTA. You know, we don't have a parent teacher kind of organization. But what we do have is we have a lot of coffee chats and question and answer periods that I've shown in other videos with standards. But this is what a sample PTA or question and answer period would look like with a coffee chat. Who are the stakeholders that are being representative and the types of things that are on the agenda. So I think again, when we go into this area here of the school implementation plan and the presentation, a lot of the things that we already do. So like the teacher coaching, observation, and mentorship, things that we already do. But what are ways in which we can strengthen it. And so that's creating those checklists and those sort of coaching and reflection materials. The next thing is the ELL enhancement for priority 2. And so again, we already have an ELL team, but as we discussed with my mentor for that SIP2, is what are the things that we can do as different departments to sort of strengthen those initiatives that we already have, but maybe we're not doing as formally as we should. And then for SIP3, again, is so student well-being. So we just had like a mental health week. And I think it was a great idea for having students kind of just, relax and distress and sort of, not focus so heavily on the comps. So we ended it on a Friday. We had a color run and sort of a water fight, or a celebration, I should say, not necessarily a fight. But just so students can kind of let loose and not worry so much about the academic rigor and the stresses of examinations. And so again, so things that we already do as a school, but just kind of strengthening those things with making sure that we have checklists, we're working, we have procedures of how we identify students of concern if we're a teacher, because again, we're not school psychologists, we're not social workers, but how can we help identify students that are maybe just having a bad day to maybe something where it's a little more concerning, and what are sort of those procedures in which we can go to senior leadership, the school psychologists that we have, and kind of help them, so that way we can be a little more proactive. And then the very last thing is the parent engagement. So we already have, I showed those in a previous, um, uh, standard. But we do have the emails in which I communicate with the parents also for standard 8. I apologize. And so again, we have those things, but as for priority 4, making sure we have that alumni base for next year, and so continuing the engagement that we have already as a school, but making sure that we're just strengthening those systems that we have, so that way, for the future generation of BASIS students, we have those strengthened systems. So we have an alumni network that's coming in, talking about the schools that they're admitted to try to strengthen recruitment. Things that, talking to parents about what they did to get a 5 on the AP exam or do well on the comprehensive exams. And so strengthening that sort of parent engagement as part of priority 4. So here, because we haven't, we already have the systems in place, and we're already, talking with my mentor about strengthening those 4 priorities. So here I would just gather this, or I would put myself into the proficient side, just because, we haven't yet implemented those priorities. Although, some of those things can be put into the handbook, and be used for next year when we go into our on-site training for the new year. And so then I think that can go from a proficient to an outstanding. But until some of those things are implemented within the school for those 4 priorities, then I think that it will just remain on the proficiency. So. Yeah. Stop share. All right. Thank you very much.